Alright, Final Fantasy VII PC version is finally out, and it looks and runs great, although I have a lot of concerns about its current graphics options, including a hidden dynamic resolution scaler, which means the game is not actually running at the resolution and frame rate that you think it is. Now, you just saw this in combat holding a solid 120 FPS. And my GPU usage was not even at 100%. But I can't push past 120 FPS because this game. Okay, so the graphics menu in this game is very frustrating. You don't get an exclusive full screen option. You can choose your resolution, I'll more on that in a minute. The texture resolution can be set to high or low, shadow resolution to high or low. The frame rate can be set. Now this is a big deal, guys. This is actually potentially a dynamic resolution scaler if your GPU can't hit the frame rate you're targeting, so very careful with this setting. Then you can adjust the characters displayed on the screen, which I think would matter if you were out in maybe the open city environment. I don't think it matters where I'm currently at. And then you get high dynamic range or standard dynamic range. Okay, now here's the big deal. The frame rate cannot be unlocked, maybe in the ini files, I don't know. But this is also a resolution target, sorry, a frame rate target, and it will dynamically scale your resolution to try to hit this. Please watch my other video, I'll link it right here if you need it, if you want a full side-by-side demonstration of this. Now, it doesn't tell you that that's what it's doing, but it is. However, we can tell that the RX 6800 XT here is running at native 1440p because we're locked at 120 FPS, but look, the GPU usage is nowhere near maxed out, which means it's not having to scale the resolution to hold the 120 FPS. We can see that it looks very, very stable here. I do notice the occasional frame rate stutter if I'm at a portion of the game that I have not yet been to, and I believe that's just a common issue with the Unreal Engine as it caches assets in the background. So the first time an asset loads, a lot of times you do get a little bit of a stutter, but if you look at the frame time graph, when we aren't having that issue, it's looking very, very solid. You can also see that it's currently using a bit more than 6 GB of VRAM, and that's consistent with what I saw in my GTX 1060 test video, where at 1440p, if you try to max out the settings, you do get some stutters due to passing your VRAM capacity. Anyway, so let's go ahead and say that there's no point going down to 1080p, because guess what's going to happen? If you go down to 1080p, well, you still have exactly 120 FPS because it doesn't go higher than that, regardless of if your screen is capable of it, because this PC port is very bare bones. Okay? So I think the only other thing that would make sense here, by the way, I can't test out ultrawide either because there's no ultrawide support. This PC port is very bare bones. Let's go up to 4K 120, but here's the issue. This is not actually 4K now. This is being dynamically resolution scaled. Now, granted, it still looks very good, but like I said, I have a video demonstrating in a side-by-side that when you zoom in, you can clearly tell that it's scaling the resolution and it's not exactly a native 4K. So, it looks and runs great, but keep in mind, it is causing some problems. Now, so if we wanted to try to figure out how, I wanted to get into battle here before I adjust settings some more, but like what actually can it do frame rate wise? Unfortunately, we're going to be limited to using the options that it has. It has 30, 60, 90, and 120. But we can try to figure out which one of those is closest to native resolution by keeping an eye on the GPU usage. You know what? Let's try out a spell while we're at it. But anyway, so as you can see, you can set it to 4K 120 and it absolutely hits it on this GPU. But as I'm about to demonstrate here, it wasn't really 4K. So it doesn't tell you that this is a dynamic scaler, but if I go down to 90 FPS, notice that my GPU usage is still in the mid-90s, percent-wise, meaning that all it did here is up the resolution closer to actually being 4K, because the dynamic scaler is not having to work as aggressively, because we're only targeting 90 FPS instead of 120 FPS, guys. Do you see? That's what's going on here. Now, in general, I think that we can hit 60 FPS easily. So notice that 60 FPS, we're now in the 70 to 80% range, right? Now down even into the 60s, into the 50s, right? We bounce around a bit. But this is actually native 4K. You can tell because the GPU isn't hitting its full usage, so it's not having to dynamically scale the image. So overall, for my 4K testing, I've got to say that you could easily do 4K 60 FPS maxed out and hit it at an actual native 4K resolution. But if you set it to 90, there's probably a very minor resolution scale that you're going to be hard-pressed to even notice, but it is there. And if you set it to 120, there is a slightly noticeable resolution scale in more demanding scenes, as I demonstrated in my other video. So I think that's pretty much what you guys need to know about this game, because like there's not much point turning down graphics settings, because the only settings that we could even turn down, like I said, are the textures and the shadows, and there's only 2 settings. That's literally it. There's not a lot going on here. So my overall evaluation of the game is that it runs very well. I'm glad it has a dynamic resolution scaler, but they need to separate it from the frame rate here. You should have a maximum frame rate, which is can set to anything you want and be unlocked, and then this frame rate thing should be called a minimum frame rate and clearly label it as a dynamic resolution scaler. Now, if you want my optimized settings guide, well, at 1440p, just max everything out and go to 120, you're fine. And it's not res scaling. At 4K, I think a 90 FPS target here makes the most sense. And the reason is, the resolution scaling is not very aggressive, so honestly, to my eye, I can't really see that it's happening, although I think there is a little bit of it happening in a lot of scenes. And to me, 90 feels way smoother than 60 does. Now, obviously, if you have a 60 hertz monitor, you know, just leave it at 60, and you'll get it at completely native 4K. But to me, the slight dynamic scale that's happening here, when I target 90, is way more than made up for by the fact that 90 feels way better than 60 to me. So, let's do one last battle here at a 90 FPS 4K target. Notice that at right now, we even saw occasionally the GPU usage dipping down low enough that it seems like we were probably at a native 4K. So I think 90 FPS here is the optimized settings for 4K, including in a battle scene. And let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I'll also be testing out my RX 6600 soon, and I already tested out my GTX 1060. Have an excellent day.